Hey there, dirt bike people. I'm Chuck from TrueTech, and today we're going to talk about the things that you should be looking for when you're buying a used motorcycle. The typical format of this video would be check over the chassis, check over the bearings, check over the engine, test ride the bike, this sort of thing. I take a completely different approach. As a seller, if there's an issue with my bike, there's a very, very good chance that I can hide that issue from a potential buyer. I know the bike way better than the buyer does. Even as somebody who's very, very familiar with checking over motorcycles, I do it literally every day and I'm very good at catching things. I can't catch everything. If there's a crank bearing that's on the way out, there's a good chance that you're not going to catch that, no matter how thorough you are. It makes much more sense to make some overarching judgments, both about the person, about their situation, and about their motorcycle to help you determine if this is going to be a good buy. So the first thing that I do if I'm going to potentially buy a motorcycle from somebody off of Marketplace or Kijiji or Craigslist or whatever, is I ask them for their address and I go on Street View and I look at their property. If their property is well kept, that tells me a lot. If it's in a pretty dumpy neighborhood, it tells me some other things. You don't want to base your entire decision on that, but it tells you something about the person who is going to own that motorcycle. Of course, Street View is not updated very regularly, so there are lots of variables there. But like I say, this is information that you can put in your basket to help make a good informed decision. The next thing I do is I ask them a bunch of questions, and I am looking for the answers and I'm paying attention, but what I'm also paying attention for is how forthcoming this person is. If there's a lot of one-word answers, and if the person is quite vague, or if they are acting like they don't know much about the motorcycle, that's definitely not a positive thing. If you ask one question and then the seller gives you a whole bunch of information and like without asking snaps pictures of receipts or gives you really close-up pictures or videos of the bike or is just really eager to give you a bunch of information, that's probably a good thing. A person who has nothing to hide is going to be very comfortable about being honest. Of course, when you roll up to the property, pay attention. Are the weeds high? Have they weed whacked around their house? Is it in the suburbs with a nice boat and a newer RV parked right beside the house? That's going to be a different scenario than if you're going to a trailer park. Nothing against either one, but these are legitimate facts that you're going to want to put towards making your decision. Next is judging the motorcycle. First is judging the seller, then we're going to be judging the motorcycle. Something that I always ask before I go look at it is if they know how many hours and how many kilometers, if that information is available. If there's high hours and low kilometers, you know that they're riding slow. If it's an enduro bike, they're probably more technical riders, so you should look for damage due to the bike tumbling off of rocks and things like that. If the mileage is high and the hours are low, then you're probably looking at a dual sport bike or maybe a vet rider. It's indicative of riding easier, faster, flowy trails. Usually it's a good thing. Although there's a good chance that you're going to be doing things like wheel bearings, but the engine is probably going to be in better shape if the mileage is higher and the hours are lower. Next, we'll get into examples here. So this one's perfect because it has a kickstart. It has a kickstart. This one also has electric start. If you're looking at an older bike that has a kickstart only, the kickstart is going to tell you almost everything. This one is super tight. There's not a whole lot of play, so I know this kickstart hasn't been used a whole lot. That's probably going to be the case more often than not with electric start bikes because the Kickstarter never gets used. If you get a bike like this that has both and the Kickstarter is worn out, probably because the electric starter has so many hours on it that it's not working. Bit of a red flag there. Now, no matter what bike, you're going to be able to check the play in the foot pegs. So this bike is a 2009. It has 230 hours on it, and the foot pegs are tight. There is not a whole lot of play. When bikes are used hard and have a lot of hours on them, these foot peg pins get worn out. Not only the foot peg pins, but the frame here, the foot pegs, this whole area. Everything generally on the bike is going to get looser, so look for loose things. This brake lever, man, it's tight. I can't believe this bike has 230 hours on it. Big red flag. If you see a shifter that's loose, it immediately tells you that the person who owns the bike can't be bothered to do basic things like tighten their shifter. That's a major red flag. If there's one thing to look at, it's the shifter. If the person doesn't even tighten their shifter, you probably want to walk away unless you're actively looking for a project. Another real big telltale thing is the controls on the bike. This guy's controls, they're nice and clean. He's got his kill button right next to his hand. That's good. You can tell he's got his clutch moved over because he cares about the controls on his bike. If you see a clutch lever that is right next to the grip, anybody who knows anything about setting up a set of handlebars knows that you don't want your clutch right next to the grip. It's totally impractical. Look for little things like that. Also, how much play is in the levers. Look for chafing and stuff on the hydraulic lines or on the cables. Again, this bike has 230 hours on it. It's in immaculate condition. This guy takes such good care of his stuff. And then there's the basic stuff. Check your wheel bearings. Lift up on the subframe. You're looking for play in the linkage bearings or like in that lower shock bearing. Anything that goes clunk, clunk, red flag. Check spokes, check the chain, check the sprockets for notched teeth. This is all the basic stuff that all the other videos are going to tell you what to do. Check over the bike. That's kind of the easy part. Next is checking the engine. Not all sellers are going to let you do this, but if I'm buying a two-stroke that has some hours on it and the seller is not okay with me removing the pipe, that's a big red flag. I have gone along with buddies to go buy two-strokes and the seller has allowed us to take pipes off and it has saved buddies of mine thousands of dollars. Bikes that have higher hours, you pull the pipe and a lot of times the Nikasil is worn right out of the cylinder or the piston is ready to explode. Usually at that point they're asking $4 or $5 grand for the machine and you immediately know that it needs an engine job. The price of the bike goes down to like 1,500 bucks. The seller doesn't want to do that. They'll go scam somebody else. Checking out a four-stroke is a nice segue into our last few tips. You want to make sure that when you show up the engine is cold. Depending on how you want to play it, you might tell the seller specifically, hey, I want a cold engine. So before you start the bike, touch it everywhere. You want to make sure that it is cold. If the seller is nervous enough about the bike that he has to warm it up before you get there, that's a big red flag. If the motor's warm, you might want to walk away. So start the bike cold. On a two-stroke, give it lots of time to warm up. On a four-stroke, you want to see what it sounds like when it's starting. Does it fire right up or does it take a lot of cranks? Honestly, on a four-stroke, it's more of a red flag if it starts easy cold, but it starts hard once it's hot. That is a big red flag because on a four-stroke, hard starting when it's hot is very likely a valve issue. Most modern four-strokes, valves are about 800 bucks for a set. Very expensive. That's not even including the machining to reseat the valves. And if it needs valves, it probably needs a piston. And if it needs piston, it might need Nikasil. So especially on a four-stroke, you want to start it cold. You want to warm it up all the way. And I mean like, you want to have the thing running for at least 20 minutes. Most people don't understand how long it takes for an engine to fully warm up. I mean like the cases are hot, all the transmission bearings, the clutch, the rings are fully expanded and the piston and everything. It needs to be thoroughly warmed up. The oil has to be hot, especially on a four-stroke. Once the engine is hot, you want to let it idle for a good 60 seconds and then blip the throttle and you're looking for signs of burning oil. That's the most reliable way to make a four-stroke burn oil is let it sit for, a minute or two and then go and blip the throttle. If it's going to burn oil, that's when it's going to do it. Then you want to shut the bike down and restart it again. Do that a bunch of times throughout your testing. If the bike is hard to start when hot, you know that you very likely have a valve issue. We know that four-strokes are quicker to warm up than two-strokes. So with a two-stroke, you want to be very sure. Man, you got to let the thing run for half an hour. I can't tell you how many times I've got a customer that brings me a bike and they're complaining of a symptom on a two-stroke and I'm just not getting the symptom. I'm not getting the symptom. 20 to 30 minutes in to test riding the bike, all of a sudden it starts to run differently. And I thought the bike was warmed up 10 minutes ago, but what most people think of as fully warmed up, it's not the case. A lot of times if there's an issue with a two-stroke, the way that it runs, it's not going to show up until 20 to 30 minutes into testing. And then there's all the basic stuff, run it through the gears. You want to check the clutch, make sure that the clutch is disengaging all the way. That's a big one. You want to go second, third, fourth gear, heavy throttle to make sure that the clutch isn't slipping. This is all the basic check over stuff that you're going to see in other videos, so I'm not going to go into super depth with that. One thing that you can do, I almost forgot, you have to check behind the air filter. If the air filter is dirty, red flag. That's like the reddest of flags. Don't just look at the air filter. Look inside the air box. This one actually has suffered from the classic KTM problem. This era KTM were known for this. You can see that a bunch of mud got in right from there. Now, I don't think this is catastrophic because it was mud. Let's see. Yeah, see it stopped there. It's okay. I'm going to clean that out. But these bikes were really bad for, see these cutouts here, that had to fit right there. And if it was just off a little bit, then there would be a big gap behind the air filter there, and that's likely what's happened here. Now, fortunately, in this case, this rider looks like he was riding on a muddy day and it wasn't dusty. If it was dusty, the motor would probably be shot. And that's a very, very good thing to catch before you buy a used bike. So again, quick recap. If the seller wants to hide something from you, that's what you're going to be looking for. A specific issue that the bike has, you're going to be very, very hard pressed to find it. So you want to get a vibe. Is this guy trying to hide something? Or is he forthcoming? Does he have nothing to hide? You want to buy a bike from the guy that has nothing to hide, regardless of whether you're buying an older bike or a bike that's almost new. Judge the seller and then judge the bike. You want an overall idea. Of course, check over the bike as thoroughly as possible, but check for things that give you signs that the seller is trying to hide something, or signs that the bike has been treated poorly or not maintained properly. If you take that approach, you're going to sidestep a lot more problems and you're going to avoid a lot more issues than if you kind of get tunnel vision and try to look at individual problems. That's about it. If you guys have any tips that I didn't mention, I'm curious to hear about other procedures or little tricks or hacks that you guys use when you're buying a used bike. Leave them in the comments. I'm looking forward to reading them. If you like this video, if you found this helpful, I'd appreciate if you give me a thumbs up, let the algorithm know. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe, hit the notification bell. And if you want to see what I'm doing on a more day-to-day basis, things like working on this bike, you can find that content on Instagram. Thanks a lot for watching.